Hello everybody, and welcome to Kerbal Space Program. Now, I recorded a video a few days back about me docking to a space station. Here it is, right up screen here. And 56 views! Wow, thanks guys. Now, since it has more views than most of our videos do, I know a vast majority of you probably went something a little like this after you were finished with it. Huh? So I thought I would explain a couple terms because, you know, not many of you are gonna know them unless you have this game. Anyways, let me get this bad boy in orbit so I can show you a couple of terms, starting with these buggers on the left over here. Alright, so the first two I'm gonna show you are prograde and retrograde. So prograde, basically, if we hit Z, which basically turns us onto full throttle, you can see if I zoom out far enough, then we do actually have an orbit, except the other end is inside the Earth. But you can see it's slowly extending outwards. Over here, you can see the periapsis is slowly going up, and that's basically what prograde does. It extends the other side of your orbit. So if we burn at the apoapsis, or the highest point, then the periapsis goes up. And if we burn for long enough, then the periapsis becomes higher than the Earth. By the way, apoapsis and periapsis are the highest point of your orbit and the lowest point of your orbit. Next up, I'm going to be explaining retrograde. Retrograde is basically the opposite of prograde. It reduces the other side of the orbit, whatever that may be. So if I hit Z over here, then you can see that my apoapsis is quickly going down. And that's basically what retrograde does. Next up, we're going to be covering radial out and radial in. Alright, so basically, it's going over to this nice white orbit, which is actually from our space station over there. But yeah, that's radial out and radial in. Next up, normal and anti-normal. First up, we're going to be covering normal. Basically, normal makes it so that the right side of your orbit goes up this way and the left side goes up this way. If you're looking at your craft directly from outside, like this kind of view. So if we burn, you can see, yep, this side's going up and this side's going down. Yeah, you can see this bit's definitely higher and this bit's definitely lower. And anti-normal, as you can guess, basically does the exact opposite. This bit goes higher and this bit goes lower. I'm gonna speed it up for you guys again. Alright, so those were the 6 core directions. Now let's move on to some rocket parts and extra fancy words. Alright, so for this first word, I've actually moved back to the launch pad because the word in question is burn. Basically, whenever we KSP connoisseurs say we burn, that basically means we're burning fuel, or otherwise just using our thrusters. So you can see if I put my throttle up to maximum and then I activate the first stage, yep, looks like we're going up because we're burning fuel. You can actually see over here on the left, the fuel gauges are slowly going down. And if we right click these parts, yep, definitely going down. Well, that's one term. Let's move on to some rocket parts. Alright, so for this bit, I've moved into the vehicle assembly building where you can actually build your rockets. So this is the moon lander that I have, and we're gonna go through all these categories. Actually, most of the categories. Some of them aren't useful in sandbox mode. Alright, so first let's do the pods. Basically, the pods are your control point. There's 2 major types. The kind of pod where a Kerbal controls it, like the standard Mach 1 pod, and the type where a robot controls it, like the remote guidance unit. However, each has their own major drawbacks and their own major benefits. Alright, next part, the fuel tanks. Fuel tanks come in 5 major sizes, except for these ones. We'll ignore them. And they are Mach 0, also known as 0.625, Mach 1, also known as 1.25, then there's Mach 2, which is mainly for space planes, but we'll ignore that for now, there's 2.5 meter. It's not called Mach 2 because that's taken up by the spaceplane parts. And then we have Mach 3, which is for the big boy rockets. There's also another size, 3.75 meter. So these are the 5 major fuel tank sizes. Now let's move on to engines that fit each of them. Alright, so there are 3 major types of engines in this game. So the major types are liquid fuel engines, jet engines, and solid rocket boosters. Now there are sizes to fit each of these fuel tanks, so I'll go over those real quick. Except for this one, because this one uses the spark liquid engine, but I don't think anyone actually uses these because they're just so minuscule, so let's just get those out of the way. Alright, so I've got the pod from the Moonlander Mach 4 because we can actually attach parts to it so you can see what's going on. Here's the Mach 1 engine. It's the Reliant engine. It also comes with a brother called the Swivel engine. But basically, I use the Swivel engine a lot for my rockets because it's just the one I like to use, I guess. The next size is going to be the 2.5 meter size. And the liquid fuel engine for this one would be the Mansail. This is the one I use for this rocket. Mach 3 and 3.75 meter, they're basically the same exact thing. There's only a tiny difference on the side there. So basically this one is circular and this one's not. But I don't think there are any engines that are actually the shape of the Mach 3. So really, I still use Mach 3 because it's just the one I see first. But really, these stages have more fuel, but that doesn't matter for me. But for the Mach 3 size, the engine I use is the Mammoth engine. It is the most powerful engine in the game. But those are only the liquid fuel engines comparisons, but they're the most common types, so I'm gonna go over turbofans. Not in this video because I really hate aviation. I'm not good at building space planes in the slightest. So I'm just gonna skip to solid rocket boosters. Basically, you can't turn them off, but they're dirt cheap. Here's the Mach 1 size, the Flea. There's also the Hammer and the Thumper. Right. The next size after that is the Twin Bore, and that's Mach 2 sized. Yes. And then after that is the Clydesdale. The Clydesdale was also Mach 2. Not Mach 2, 2.5 meter. I guess there are no Mach 3 fuel I guess there are no Mach 3. I guess there are no Mach 3 SRBs. I'm learning as much as you in this video because I actually haven't studied most of these parts. Anyways, let's move on to command and control, where basically the only useful things here that I use personally are RCS thrusters. I've talked about them extensively in my Kerbal space program docking to a space station video, so go watch that one. But yeah, I'm just gonna skip over these. Basically, in like 10 seconds, they let you control your rocket really well, and they let you turn faster and you can move with them. Structural, the main parts I use in here are gonna be this adapter, the Rockomax brand adapter, because I don't use the one that has fuel in it for some reason, because I'm lazy. There's also struts in this one, which are super helpful because let's say 2 rocket parts don't really want to be connected all that well. Just strut them together. It's no big deal. Anyways, there's also a bunch of other stuff in here, like all these stuff that are mainly like for linking things together, or these more adapters. But then there's also these called launch stability enhancers, where basically they just keep your rocket up in the air for like this, so it doesn't topple over. Next up, coupling. I use 2 things in here, all the decouplers and the coupling units. Yes, docking ports. I forgot the word. First, we'll do the decouplers because there's sizes for each of the different ones I told you before. So there's Mach 0, there's Mach 1, there's 2.5 meter. Let me show you. Here's the Mach 1. Here's the Mach 1, Here's the 2.5 meter one, and here's the Mach 3 one, or the 3.75 meter one. There are also docking ports in this section, which I used in the docking video, but I didn't really explain them. So basically, if you take one docking port and another docking port on a different craft, and you scooch them together really slowly and really precisely, then they touch, then they become part of the same craft, and then you can undock them. Now, all the different types of docking ports are the Clampatron docking port, the Clampatron docking port Senior, which is for 2.5 meter, and the inline Clampatron, which opens from the side, which is super helpful. There's also the Clampatron docking port Junior, but it's absolutely tiny. It's for Mach 0. Next up, let's move on to payloads. Oh no, wait, no. First, there's a shielded docking port, but I don't use this one because it's just a Clampatron docking port, except it has a shield on it, but I use fairings anyway, which are in the payload section. Fairings. There's also cargo bays in here, but I don't use them, so fairings. Basically, if you take a fairing and you put it on a craft, like let's say we'll put a fairing over here, for instance. You can build around the craft with the fairing, and this is their main purpose, to shield other things. But they're also really broken. Let me demonstrate for you real quick. If I put a fairing on here, then I go all the way out, then I place, then I go as far in as I can without closing the fairing. Then I place, then I go far out, and then far in. You can just keep doing this until you get something beautiful. Let me show you. Ah, yes, it is perfect. The dinner plate! Look at this magnificent being. Why does the game let you do this even? Oh my god. It is so cursed. I kind of want to fly this thing and see what it would look like if I made it split. Hold up, let me go back and do that real quick. Alright, so here's our magnificent rocket. We're not actually going to make it fly. We're just going to take the fairing and put it on this bottom stage right here. Look at that beauty. Now let's see how on earth this thing opens. You like apple slices? Alright, let's go back. So basically that was the payload section. Let's move on to aerodynamics. Now this section, I have a love-hate relationship. I love it because nose cones, and nose cones are very important. In fact, if you didn't know that, you should know that. But also, the reason I hate this section is because it contains most of the parts for space planes. And as I said before, I am terrible at building space planes. Let's move on to the next section, which is pretty simple. It's just a bunch of plane landing gear and rocket landing gear for this kind of landing gear, for when you land on the moon or something, or whatever. Let's move on to the next section. Thermal. These are only gonna get quicker and quicker because thermal is actually pretty simple. It's just a bunch of heat shields everywhere from Mach 0 to 1.25 to 2.5 to 3.75 to this ridiculous 10 meter one for some reason. I don't know why they have this in the game, but it's really funny because it's stupidly big. Electrical. This is actually where it gets interesting again because this contains all the batteries for the remote guidance units you need. Now, the ones I used for my docking missions, I already said this in the other video, but I use 2 Z400 batteries, and that gets me through an entire launch, and I can dock with the space station pretty easily. But the biggest battery there is actually 2.5 meter sized. And guess how big it is? It is 4,000 electrical charge. Yeah, 4,000. That is, so it's 5 times more battery power than what I usually use for my space station launches. For one of them! There's also solar panels in this section that range all the way from the miniature 3x2 panels all the way to the ginormous Gigantor XL solar arrays, and look at these bad boys. Absolutely massive, am I right? Let's move on to the next section, which is going to be communication. Now, if you use communication in sandbox mode for anything other than decoration, then what are you doing? These are only useful in science mode or career mode. Science, it's the same story. Unless you're using these for decoration, they're not useful in sandbox mode. Cargo, this is... I don't really use this section all that much. It's a bunch of EVA stuff, basically. Now, final section, utility. Now, these have lights, and they have parachutes and ladders. Now, make sure to put parachutes on everything, because parachutes are important if you want to save your loved ones. Also known as Jebediah Kerman. Just kidding. They also have ladders in this section, as I said before. But, yeah, that's basically it. Alright, it also has the launch escape system, which is basically meant to take away the crew capsule in case anything goes wrong. But I don't use that because nothing really goes wrong during the launch. So, yeah, that's all those parts in here. And I know I promised a couple extra fancy words, but I can't come up with any right now, so let me think in the other corner of the room. Alright, I came up with a few. So I've already told you what apoapsis and periapsis are, but I'm going to repeat them here because this is the fancy word section. Apoapsis is basically the highest point of your orbit, and periapsis is the lowest point of your orbit. Now there's two more terms. First one is delta V. That's how much you can change your velocity. Because in science, delta means change, and V in this case means velocity. There's actually a symbol for it right here. Anyways, the final term I have is thrust to weight ratio. So basically, if you click on any of these stages, this top bit up here with a delta V marker. Now this isn't properly staged because I've just been slapping parts on randomly, but if we click this, then you can see TWR, that is the thrust to weight ratio. And if this is above 1, that's good. Higher, that means it's gonna go up really fast. But yeah, that's basically it for this game. And I just want to say thanks for watching, and bye! There's a video to the left, and there's another video to the right. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Bye! So, wow, at the time of recording, there's 58 views. Thank you so much, guys. I really didn't think this would be that popular, but, thanks. Bye.